on to the first question. Since leaving high school, have you participated in any college, courses, or job training? And based on the answer, it either leads me into what have you been doing, right? Or what post-secondary option have you chose? So which of the following higher education or settings have you enrolled in? And it's multiple choice, so they can tell me. Based on that one, it may lead us into vocational options that they chose, things like Job Corps, humanitarian programs, AmeriVista is one of the options, and AmeriCorps. If none of these apply to them, so they haven't attended any post-secondary options, the next question is, since leaving high school, have you had any employment? Typically, I want to hear, yes, Ms. Cote, I have worked. Then I have to say, have you worked for at least 3 months or 90 days since leaving high school, right? And a lot of them are like, well, I don't know, but I started in June and I'm still there. And I'm like, that's great, you've been working over a year, I'd love to hear that. So then the next question is, where are you working, right? Tell me where you're working. And I hear things like, this year was Wabash. And the student there is doing very well, our past student. Walmart Distribution Center, again, they're doing very well there. I have a student who's working at Quick Trip, doing wonderful. I have a student who's working at Senex, doing wonderful, right? These are all great things for our programming. Then I have to ask them the hardest question ever, how much are you making? Now, students don't really want to tell me how much they're making because they already know they're probably making more than me, especially if they're at some of those places. So they'll be like, I'll be like, okay, are you making at least $7.25 an hour? Yes, Ms. Cote, I'm making more than that. Are you making $10? Yes. Are you making $15? More than that. Are you making more than $15? Because that's the last option. And then they're like, yes, I'm making more than that, right? Which leads us into, well, do you get benefits? Well, tell me what benefits you're looking for. Do you get a 401k? Do you get a retirement? Do you get insurance? The answer to some of those questions is always yes or no. So that takes us to our data for the year. The next slide you have is the class of 2023 data. And it talks about, you had a potential 30 graduates identified with special needs. 24 of those graduates responded to me, which means they returned a phone call, they met me at the fair, we had a conversation over a hot dog, a corn dog. We met at McDonald's. I had a couple that I met at McDonald's. One I had to go to his job and meet with him because he doesn't have a phone. 16.7% or 4 are pursuing a higher education. 54.2 of them are competitively employed. Okay, when I look at the state comparison for that, it's only 36.2% statewide. So a lot of our kids are going into the employment route right now. That's where they want to be. 0 of them are pursuing a post-secondary education or training. That would be a program like Job Corps, AmeriCorps, Vista Care. We're working with DVR to find employment. And then 16.7 of them are other employment, at least 90 days. Meaning, maybe they did 3 temporary work experiences through DVR and were found that they couldn't find a full-time job. That still counts as a temporary work experience, still counts as other employment for us in this survey. So if you compare the previous year, the class of 2022, I had 40 potential respondents with 36 people who actually responded back to me. And our numbers look similar. So 13.9% of them pursued higher education, 58.3% were competitively employed, 2.8%, or 1, was participating in another post-secondary education program, and then 6 didn't meet any criteria. Now, they don't meet criteria because they're not still employed, but they still answered the survey for me, which counts for us. So what does this mean for transition? It means that through the grant, it is a state grant. There's X amount of dollars given for indicator 14, and then the transition improvement grant looks at how many people respond. They take that pool of money and they pass it out equally amongst all the districts. This year it was $947, 61.7 cents. So just over $947 a student. So our district will receive, or has received, approximately $16,000, right? So what do we do with that money? Right now, the high school special education team we've been meeting with some outside providers. So places like Opportunity Development Center, VARC, which is out of La Crosse, but they have what they call a student-based program, Insight, and they are offering us some opportunities where they would come in and teach things that we don't, A, have time to teach within our day, or B, our kids don't listen to us because they listen to us 37 and a half hours a week, and they're tired of hearing our voices. So sometimes that presentation from someone else makes all the difference in the world. Sometimes I will apply for additional funding using this data, but our focus right now as a department is really on how do we help our population of emotionally behaviorally disturbed students, those that label, right? How do we help them find long-term employment, not just these short 1 month here, 1 month here, 1 month here. That's really our focus for the rest of this year with our transition funds. We are offering to pay for some certification courses through Mid-State, those short-term 9-week option where kids can leave with some certification in something. Welding, there's a cosmetology option right now, so we're looking to spend some of that money that way. We're also looking for a Skills to Pay the Get Bills summer program for our current students where they could come in, they would have an outside instructor, it would be a paid work experience through DVR, and they would receive a check after successfully completing the program. Not from the district, through DVR. Our monies would pay for the teacher for the summer. Are there any questions?
Questions? I don't think so.
Then I'm going to go back to musical practice. You guys have a good time.
And Shanna, thanks for all that you do. Shanna is one of our exceptional high school special ed teachers, so thank you.
All right, Board of Education reports.
Oh, we missed the teaching in there.
Oh, I did miss one. See, this paper stuff is screwing me. Yep, that would have worked too.
In the interest of time and the fact that we have no internet, the big thing that we want to talk about tonight is just our high school program of studies. In policy 2220, it is required that the board approves the program of studies each year. And this is part of the curriculum development that we do as well. And this year, the only changes that we have are name changes in another course that Kevin's going to talk about at the high school. Otherwise, we don't have any new proposals for the elementary or middle school. So later in the agenda under this policy, you'll have the opportunity to approve these, but this would be the chance to ask any questions that you have after Kevin talks about name changes and so forth.
All right, as Heather said, the one math course we were offering, it's called Analysis and Concepts, so we're adding that in. It's a bridge course between two math courses we currently offer, between Math 3 and Math 4. It's for students that might struggle a bit to get to those higher level concepts, but still they're able to meet the graduation requirement. There's no additional cost for this because it's part of our current curriculum that we use. So that's the only new course that we're proposing. The other name changes, we have a 9th grade social studies description change because we purchased some new curriculum last year through TCI, and so it was just an update to match that curriculum. In FIAD, we're combining two courses that were pretty similar, and the teachers, with some new teachers in the department, decided just to make that one course. Advanced Woods, we're just changing to Woods 2, so just a name change. We linked in CTE pathways, so students, if they're on the digital version of this, they can actually look through different pathways to careers within every CTE program that we have. And then the last thing was updating our Health Career Academy, so just wanted to bring that up again as an academy we have in partnership with Gunderson Mountain View and NSDC, where students are getting a technical diploma certification through Mid-State by taking one of our courses with Mr. Vance, medical terminology, which was approved last year. That was the course we're offering this year. That's dual credit, so students are getting college Mid-State credit for that, and while they're in high school, taking it from our high school teacher, and then they take, right now we have about 12 students taking, take that back, 9 students taking health, human body, and disease, or human body, health, and disease. One of those 3 things. They're doing that, and then they'll do a job shadow this spring at Gunderson in an area that they choose. So they finish those 3 things, and they have their certificate for the Health Careers Academy. So that's added in as well. Any questions about school program studies.
And one of the things that we've been hearing, Kevin, is that there's a tremendous need for people to enter the health professions in our community, and so we're trying to bridge that with Gunderson, Mountain View, and a few other agencies as well.
A great partnership. I was actually meeting with those 3 representatives today because we're presenting through a grant. It's funding a presentation at the national conference in February. So they feel that'll be really well attended because other people will want to emulate what we're doing, which is that partnership, which most people don't get. The hospital partnering with us, and Carrie Easterly, that's part of her job, is to help arrange those job shadows, and we have students job shadowing there now, and we look forward to expanding that program and improving and keeping our graduates here working in jobs that they may not even know exist because they've never been inside that area of the hospital.
Any
The
questions?
full program of studies can be found at the link you have. We did not print it because it's how many pages?
50, 60
50 or 60 pages. So we're happy to provide that for you if you'd like a printed copy as well. So any questions about any of this?
Is that a curriculum for the high school or for all the schools? For all the
Yes.
schools? You can
Yes.
find all the curriculum online?
Yes,
And I'm not very user-friendly.
completely agree.
And the
Something
link
that
for
we're
the
working
program
on.
studies is just for the high school.
Exactly.
That-
Okay, is there a way that the other schools can be easily?
Yes, we are in the process of working on that with some other changes we're putting through because of Act 20. So it'll be easier to
So
find.
it's not,
When we've had
linked up
people
yet.
ask, I send them all that information, and very few people ask and are looking, but yeah, definitely. Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Anything else? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Kevin.
All right, now we can move on. Board of Education reports. Board have anything?
I do.
Joni, sorry.
I just wanted to say that last month I went to Madison and I participated in planning for a legislative day down in Madison with the Wisconsin Public Education Network. One of the decisions we came up with is that we didn't want to ask for less than what we wanted, so instead of 90% for special ed, we're going to ask for 100 because that's what we want.
And I believe what she's referring to is special education
Yes.
funding.
Yes.
Which is currently reimbursed at about 32%, I believe, in the state of Wisconsin. It was initially promised that it would be funded at 2/3, and now the state superintendent of public instruction is recommending 90%. Most districts in the state of Wisconsin have to transfer funds from their general fund to balance their special education books. So this year we'll probably be transferring close to $3 million. We don't have the exact number yet, from our general education fund into our special education fund, because the special education fund we cannot run a deficit in. So that takes money away from many of our other students. Not trying to make it a competition, but it's the reality of the current funding formula.
Thank you, Tom. And Joe. All right. District Administrator report.
I'd like to talk for an hour about the special education funding formula. No, I just want to thank the community task force that met for a few months leading up to last week's board meeting. They put a lot of time and energy into their work for the benefit of the community, and we're trying to follow their lead and recommendations regarding how we move into the future. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Pages. All right, do I have a consideration to go into closed session? Consideration to go into closed session? Consideration to go into closed session. Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to adopt the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Lena and Bobby?
Laura.
Oh, sorry, Laura. All right, on the consent agenda, we have gifts from Rich and Deb Wacholtz of $200. Donation for the Adams Friendship FFA Alumni Association for National Convention sponsorship and FFA jackets in the amount of $820. And a donation from AF Motors of a 2010 Dodge Caravan. We have the bills for December. We have meeting minutes, and they are from the December 9th meeting and our 12/19 meeting. We have no retirements. We have 3 resignations: Scott Ships, Christine Berg, and Teacher G. We have no staff transfers. We have hiring recommendations of Caitlin Clark, assistant girls soccer coach; Angela White, paraprofessional; Emily Sedgwick, paraprofessional; Michelle Bunk, paraprofessional; Ashley Sanabria, paraprofessional; and Amanda Buckmeyer, accounts payable specialist. And we have a calendar change here. Oh, that's a separate, isn't it? Or is that on the consent agenda?
That's on there as well.
Okay. To go from, we were originally gonna do the March 19th for the Act 20, and moving that to the March 21st day, right before spring break.
So instead of the Wednesday, we decided it would probably be better for families if we moved that day for our elementary students to that Friday prior to spring break.
All right. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, we will start this vote with Justin.
Yes.
Lena,
Yes.
Joni,
Yes.
Mandy,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Bobby,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Passes 8-0. All right.
I just wanted to make a comment. It's very unfortunate that we have teacher resignations halfway through the year, and disappointed in one of those resignations and how it transpired.
Thank you. All right, moving on. We'll make a motion for the finance, or we need a motion to do the minutes for the finance committee meeting on December 9th. Do I have a motion for that?
I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Mandy, second by Lena, to approve the finance committee meeting minutes. Discussion. Seeing none, we will start this vote with Lena.
Yes.
Joni,
Yes.
Mandy,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Bobby,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Passes 8-0. All right. All right, new business. Consideration and action on contract services.
In your packet, you'll have a single page that's front and back copied regarding rehiring Donna Olson in her retirement, which I think is going to be beneficial for our district as we transition. Tonight, you just approved the hiring of Amanda Buckmeyer, who will be taking over Donna's position, but Donna will be willing to come back and help with scholarships and do some training. And we recommend that you approve that contract highly.
I'll make a motion to approve the contracted services for Donna Olson after her retirement week time.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Joan? Motion by Lena, second by Joni, a motion to approve contract services for Donna Olson after her retirement wait time. Discussion.
So the other person that we hired is going to be training underneath Donna
Or
When-
she's
when-
gonna be working with Donna?
Training underneath.
Jane training, this will be her training transition.
Correct. And Donna has, as we spoke about last month, 36 years of
Yes.
institutional knowledge in our district around a number of processes, particularly our scholarship program. So we're gonna need her help
Right.
as we transition into the next year.
So will this contract solely be for the training purposes and then she won't be here anymore?
She might continue to help us, particularly with the scholarship processes.
How long is this contract for? Like for a year, the school year?
It's March 24th, ending June 30th, 2025.
It's for a few months.
Oh,
She has to have a wait-out period in the state of Wisconsin. Once you leave employment and education, a 75-day wait-out period, and then this contract would end the end of this fiscal school year, the end of June.
Anything else from the board? All right, seeing none, we'll start this vote with Joni.
Yes.
Mandy?
Yes.
Laura?
yes.
Bobby?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Lena?
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Passes 8-0. Next up is consideration and action on Site Logic contract change.
When we first entered into a contract with SiteLogic, and Tom Weber and Karen Gagne are here from SiteLogic tonight as well, so they might be able to add in. When we first entered into a contract with SiteLogic, we entered into a design-build services agreement. Because of the variables associated with the construction industry right now, if we were to maintain a design-build services agreement, we would be tacking on approximately $2.5 million to each of our referendum questions. This gives us a little bit more flexibility in the construction project. We do take on some of the ownership and liability, but it's basically the same level of services for significantly less resources. And Tom, I don't know if I'm doing that justice or not, or Karen.
Absolutely. So the difference between the two is, because we need to pad it to have that, for inflation that's going on. If we switch to the professional service agreement, we can bring that down. You take a little more risk on in the scope, but we can get you that, like let's say we go with option one, we can keep you at that 16 million, first question. Whereas if we stay with the contract that we have, we're going to bump that up to 18 million, and it's unlikely to probably pass. The whole question is what? Any questions?
Questions?
I guess maybe I misunderstood it when I was reading it because I was looking at it as it was changing them from the designing aspect of what they've already done to actual construction, like finalizing dollars in the construction aspect versus creating a design for the buildings.
In the design-build services agreement, we couldn't have any change orders, basically. And so they would have to increase the project cost or decrease the scope of the project. So they would take on that liability and the risk. Now we're taking on the risk, but we believe it's a financial gain for us.
Or the savings. So if the bids came in lower, they would just be able to, essentially in the first one, they would be able to keep those proceeds if the bids came in lower than that extra $2.5 million that was built in. Or now if the bids come in lower, then that just benefits the school district.
But it is putting it into a construction mode versus,
We still get
That was-
control over who gets to come in and do the construction. They don't actually have their own people that come in and do construction.
They serve as the manager, construction manager, but they're not a construction company.
Right, but it would be saying though that you're moving forward with the referendum because it would go into a building stage versus a design stage. Unless I'm misunderstanding the way I read it, that was the way I read it.
The contract is almost identical in language to the one that you previously approved, except it changes the language from a design build services agreement to a professional services agreement. And Tom, maybe, and Karen, maybe you guys can help differentiate that.
Just to confirm, right, all the services that are involved, the architectural, the engineering, the project management, those services are the same in both contracts, and those would be services that we would provide. It's really just a difference in how it's priced. In the first one, you could take a look at it almost like there's a guaranteed, maximum price, there's no change orders, but because the variability that was mentioned in the cost of construction materials and labor and that type of thing, we're looking out probably, 2 and 3 years before the project is completely finalized. So there's got to be some buffer in there to make sure that if those prices go up and what have you, that those fiscal obligations can be met. In this situation here, we'll provide all of those services still that we had planned. All of the construction services, all of the equipment and materials that are involved go out to bid, they come back, do a bid opening. Ultimately, you, the school board, will make those decisions on how that work is awarded. We'll help you with that decision where you need. If there's slight increases, we'll go through a process with our architects and engineers and doing some value engineering to try to realign that pricing. If the prices come in lower than what are estimated, the school district is able to use those funds in other areas, either enhance some of the features of the project or potentially do some things that had not been planned but still fit within the referendum.
And I think in certain states, they don't even allow design build services agreements. Is that correct?
Correct.
Any other questions?
I guess I'm confused about
I'm not understanding this, I'm sorry.
I guess I'm confused about the additional 2.5 million because when you look at the general fees related to this, all of them are over or more than that unless we're talking about referendum question 2. So does that mean in the original agreement, we were saying we were gonna pay more than this? Because this looks to be about a decent percentage amount for the fees.
Yes, there would be an additional buffer. We would have gotten less for our money with the design build services agreement.
So are we crossing over from the, I'm going to say concept into the actual building right now? Is that what this is really doing?
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Well, nothing would move forward until the referendum is, so it
Is
doesn't mean that
voted on?
right. So it's
So
not
that changes nothing?
No, it's
Okay.
just, essentially what it is
Okay.
that the district is taking on the liability. If it goes more, then we have to be able to cover those costs or cut areas of furnishings or whatever it is. If the district, if it comes in, the bids come in lower, then we get to reap those benefits. But what they're saying is that in order to, as a business, as a company, build in those buffers, if you will, they would have to say to our community, we need to ask for 2.5 more million for them to have a cushion for that, which we know our community cannot sustain. So we are saying that this is what we need to get the project completed, and that's the numbers that they're coming up with. And we know that they don't have a built-in buffer with their fees that are associated with it.
We work under both types of contracts, in particular here in Wisconsin. When you've got a shorter project, it doesn't run as much time, there's less risk. And for some districts, it is helpful just to have that all taken care of for them. And it makes it simpler and there's value, all right? In this particular case, obviously, a lot of what's driving this project is being able to reduce budget, right? And be very fiscally sound in what that direction forward is. And so the other option that we're talking about here tonight, the professional services agreement, allows the district to channel more of those funds into the project and avoid some of those extra costs because of the length of time that the project will run.
I guess I'm wondering about the timing of this, because it really hinges on if the referendum passes or not, so is it?
Aren't we voting if we're gonna have it on?
But my point is if a referendum doesn't pass, then we're not doing anything with them to design a building. So I guess that's why I'm wondering about the timing of approving this contract, because it feels like it's a little bit out of order.
Well, we already approved an initial contract with them earlier in the year. I can't remember exactly which month. That was a design build services agreement. In our conversations with SiteLogic, we'd be looking at an additional $2.5 million for the same project, because they would then guarantee that we would do exactly that project.
But my point is that if we don't do a project, then we don't, like, what's the point of having the contract?
We would still be obligated to pay approximately $30,000 for the
Correct,
services.
I understand that. So I guess from my perspective, the original, like, let's get this ready for referendum was like the $30,000. I understand that if a referendum would pass and we choose to build forward, then that $30,000 goes into that, the cost of whatever we're doing, but if we're not there yet, it seems a little bit premature. I mean, I get like knowing the information, but like from a timing perspective, I'm not trying to be doom and gloom, but if nothing passes and it fails, then we're not continuing to work with them, so we don't need to change the scope of our contract.
It was just the difference in the amount that we would be asking. So if we went with what we have, we would have to ask for at least $2.5 million more on the referendum question, which is why the change is coming up now. Because of the same scope, to build in that buffer, et cetera, we'd have to change when they did the square footage, and this is how much it would cost to go out to the community. When we did the surveys of what our community would be able to tolerate, it was your community is not going to be able to tolerate this additional $2.5 million on here. And so to take that away, to be able more feasible to what the community could tolerate and to put the money back into the actual building project, then it was, we could move forward with the PSA instead, which is the district doing more of the lifting, taking on more of that in order to actually put the money towards the project and not necessarily the safety net.
I get that, but I'm just like, why can't we do that if we know what the referendum outcome
We have
is
to
on?
change the amount that we're asking in the referendum. So instead of asking 16
So
million,
basically,
we have
this
to
is
ask
not
18.
on the table unless we do it now before we actually ask the referendum question. I guess that's why, like, why couldn't we get this pricing?
To find out if we want to
After
move
April.
forward with the referendum would seem logical to me to vote that first before.
We have to ask for more,
Yes.
so you guys take the risk.
Correct.
Otherwise, we are going to be taking the risk. And if something comes back costing more, we need to skim down the project.
We would engineer it down, correct.
We would change the project.
And we would go through a process called value engineering. It's done all the time on projects, depending on what the difference is, or actually go out and rebid, that piece of the project.
Because you can't guarantee when we do this in 2 years, or that the prices are gonna stay the same.
Correct.
So you're not gonna take
that.
that-
That we can fulfill that obligation. And so, so what Nikki said is correct. We either would need to add, some money to the referendum amounts to stay under that same contract, or change it. The problem would be, and this is just really mitigating the risk for you, is that if you go forward with the referendum, if the referendum passes, we're still under contract in the other manner. You could potentially change the contract, but you would need to make sure that we're able and willing to change the contract at that point. This establishes it prior to going to referendum. It protects your interests, that you can actually get what you're asking for at the price that you're asking for.
So it's 18 million to get what was presented, or we stick with 16 and we may get half as much, but if construction prices are way up.
Correct.
Let me try this one.
What was presented is just they would have the buffer there. They have their own little savings account, if you will, if you vision it that way.
But I'm saying if we didn't.
The project is $16 million, that's what they're projecting it to cost. but they want 2.5 million to tuck over here in case there's a change order that comes in, or maybe the cost of whatever comes up then, and we're not willing to change it in the original one, they have to move forward with, okay, we're taking on that risk. This way, we don't have to tack on the 2.5 million to the original 16 million of what is projected. Right now, that's what it's projected to cost to do exactly how the square footage is laid out. And we don't have to ask our community for $2.5 million more for them to have a safety net.
But we could also end up with a lot less building.
If prices were to go on, yes, that's where we're saying we're taking on the lifting there.
And I guess my concern is that the way I read this, we're not getting $16 million of a building if they're making $3 million or $4 million as their cost. So if we're asking the community for $16 million, but we're gonna pay them $3 million, we're really getting $13 million of a building already. And I realize that the prices could go crazy, and then we're getting $10 million of a building.
Well, and I'm not sure where the 3 million that you were.
It's in the back page right here about what the fees are based on what referendum passes. So that's where I'm reading that.
Okay, so the fees are not what SiteLogic makes on the project. The fees are what cover the cost of.
Right, I understand that that's not your profit. I understand you're a business and you need to make a profit, right? Like, I'm not saying that. I'm saying though, as it is already, that additional like 2.5 million that we're talking about is, this is basically written in here. It's basically written in here already.
Wasn't there another survey that was supposed to go out with the 2 questions on it? A survey, not, a survey about the referendum.
About 500 people responded to the
No,
survey.
no, that one was done, it was complete, yes. But I thought that we were gonna have another survey go out with the 2 questions. Did I misunderstand it?
No, we don't have time for that.
No, and that would be.
It was just the one and only?
That wouldn't
Okay,
be typical.
all right. I misunderstood.
I guess I just have to ask again, because I'm not, I'm not hearing the question, my question, I'm not hearing the answer unless it's like I need to stand up to have it grasped. But I thought that we, as a board, needed to vote if we were even taking it to a referendum. That's what I thought we were doing as a board, that we were voting yes or no, that we were gonna take something to a referendum.
And that's later in
It's
the
later
agenda.
in the agenda.
But we do this before
We've
the
already
vote.
voted on a contract with them.
So
a
it's
few
just
months ago.
adjusting the original contract, but it
Correct.
doesn't have anything to do with the referendum?
Correct.
Okay, because I was really confused about that.
Yeah,
Okay,
what voting on those is coming up in a few
okay.
bullet points.
Hard when you're used to looking at your computer.
It's challenging.
It is challenging.
Any other questions? What would the board like to do?
So if we don't change the contract, we would be going,
We'd be
and we
having-
could go to the referendum with the amount of money we asked, but we could end up with $2 million less of a project.
Or we'd be having a special board meeting on Thursday night.
I thought Thursday night was too late to do the bond.
Or Wednesday
That's for the
night, or whatever.
referendum questions.
Yeah.
I'm confused over what you said, Noah, about that being a sliding scale. Could you go over that one more time?
The sliding scale.
It's not
Yeah,
a sliding scale.
Okay,
So instead of paying architectures, they
Right.
would charge usually 6% or something. And engineers would charge 8% of the
Right.
project, and this one would charge this. What they're saying is they'll take care of the engineers, the architects, the general contractors, the overseeing, doing the management, I'm forgetting some of them, sorry. But all the ones that would typically put in their percentages of a job for this flat amount, which is what Mandy was referring to as the last part, the 3,025,000. So instead of us going out and hiring different people to do different pieces of it, and typically that comes in at 22%. So this is 18.75% of the overall scope of the project. Typically, when you go out and have to hire these individuals to do each of this work, it comes in at about 22 to 24% of your overall project, which is what needs to be built in when we're going to the community and asking for the scope of work to be done. It's not just all building and labor, it's the upfront cost of all of these different skilled trades in order to be able to make the project complete.
So basically, the only difference on this is the timing of it, because if the referendum fails, nothing happens, if I understand it correctly.
Correct.
Is that right? So then if we wait on this, we could be spending more money in the long run.
Either way, if the
It's gonna
referendum
be
fails,
about
we're
this.
done. Either
Well,
way,
no, I'm
it's-
just forget that for a minute. Now we move on. The referendum passed.
Yeah.
The next step in this thing is we're gonna either leave the contract the way it is and have this 3 million in, is that right? Or we're gonna change it to the 18% and let them manage it. Is that
It's still 18%.
still 18?
They're
It's
gonna
just-
manage it no matter what,
Right.
either
Okay.
contract we do.
Either one, there, it looks the same. It's just, the only difference of what the scope of work is they typically with the DBA would build in a $2.5 million extra buffer for change orders or for delayed or
Oh, okay,
whatever.
I gotcha.
For that extra. Right now, they're not going to build in that extra 2.5%. The project is just the 16 million. And if something like that were to happen, we would have to have the burden of cost.
And-
Or if things come in under budget, then we would get the savings of that.
Right.
It's just that extra safety net of the 2.5 million. Other than that, the fee is the same as far as what, the 18.75%, that all stays the same. It's just who's taking on the risk right now.
Best guess, when is this complete? I mean, 3 years, 5 years, 2 years? I'm just asking.
When is
The project
all
complete?
Because it's an April referendum, you're probably about 2.5 years.
Yeah, 3 years. Yeah, that
I mean,
doesn't.
there'll be some things that, will complete,
Sure,
you know.
sure. No, I'm just
sooner
saying,
than that, but
just saying overall
overall,
finances and everything. And
Full completion of the entire scope, likely about two, by the start of school, let's see, what would that be, we're in 24, 25 now, 25, 26, 27,
26,
it'd be fall 27.
And when you look over the history, some of the reason why they build in this right now is because after COVID, we saw the rates of everything go through,
no,
the ceiling. And so in order to safeguard, people build in these additional $2.5 million budgets in order for that projection if it were to happen. When they've looked at the cost, they have built in some inflation amounts. It's not straightforward of what the cost is today. They have considered what it would be in the next 18 to 24 months in building that into the scope. So it's not, we all know that prices are going to increase more than likely over the next 2 years. It's just how much and the variation of that.
Thing is, we're gonna be, if it goes through, we're gonna be getting contracts from people to build this already next summer. I would assume we're gonna get people locked into a price that they're gonna have to be held to.
sure. I look at it as if this is, let's say, a 3-year project rather than 2.5. You know how much it goes up in 3 years. I mean, just in general, and not sure that's unrealistic. To have that kind of a span. Especially with some of the other things going on right now with materials and stuff for the next number of years.
You do take some of that extra risk with the scope, but the reason we recommended you switching to this other contract is because we can keep you at that $16 million mark, which is what we know from our community survey and our community engagement, that's what your community will willing to support. So we think that's what's gonna pass, and that's how we can keep you there. If we add this 2 million on, or up to 18 million, unlikely to pass. That's why we came up with this recommendation.
Personally, I would like to just, I would prefer the adding the $2 million, because I think if we go over the next 2 months and promise the community we're gonna build a building that holds, 4th through 7th or 4th through 6th, whatever, and then we get it and we're in the other boat and now we can't build a building that holds that much with our funds, I mean, that doesn't look good either. I'd rather be upfront, like, this is how much. If you approve this much, we're guaranteed this building. That's just my thinking behind it.
And I'm probably the opposite way, I would take the risk. I mean, because we're gonna be getting people in contract this summer, potentially, and you'd be able to hold them to that price. There might be certain things that might get away, but there's that percentage already built in to protect us.
And we don't really know until they actually start giving us quotes either, so.
If we go and ask for another 2.5 million or 2 million, it's gonna be even tougher to sell.
So this number has to change to 18 or roughly in either case?
No,
The 16?
No, it stays 16.
Okay.
If we change the contract to what is.
So you want a motion to change this? I mean, that's what you're waiting on, potentially.
We've got to decide what we want to do. It's not me making the full decision here, Justin.
I meant like that's what
This is
we're
the
waiting
board.
for right now.
Yes.
A
The
potential
changes,
motion,
I
yeah.
mean, this motion will change, if we don't do anything here, then the next couple motions don't mean a thing, because it's gonna have to go back, and we're gonna have to have another meeting tomorrow night, or whenever, however it works. That's where we're at.
I'll make the motion to approve the change.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Change to, excuse me, just,
The contract.
The motion would be to approve a site logic contract change from a design build service agreement to a professional service agreement.
okay, exactly what we're talking about here?
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you.
Was that you, Steve, to make
Yeah.
the second? Okay.
Yeah, second.
Thank you, Steve. Any other discussion? All right, we will vote. We will start this vote with Mandy.
Yes.
Laura,
No.
Bobby,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes?
Justin,
No.
Lena,
Yes.
Joni,
Yes,
and my vote is yes. Passes 6-2. All right, moving on. All right, 6.3, consideration and action on approval to allow WASBA General Assembly representative to vote on the 2025 resolutions. And I am typically, or I have been, the one that has went through that. It just gives me the right to vote how I feel would be best for our district.
I'll make that motion.
And I'll second it.
A motion by Justin, second by Bobby. Motion to allow WASBA General Assembly Representative, myself, to vote on behalf of the AFASD and on the resolutions contained in the attached link. So there is a link on that has all the resolutions that will be gone over, so. Any other discussion?
Just that you don't have any problems with the wordings?
No.
Okay.
And I believe Jim was voted on during the organizational
Yes.
meeting. I think Joni's the alternate
Right,
for
right.
this, so.
Yep. Anything else? All right, we will start this vote with Laura.
Yes.
Bobby?
Yes.
Steve?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Lena?
Yes.
Joni?
Yes.
Mandy?
Yes.
And my vote is yes, passes 8-0. All right, 6.4, consideration and action on initial resolution number authorizing general obligation bond in the amount not to exceed $16,135,000 on the April 25th election.
And this is the number that was determined based on the survey results. That has a high likelihood of passing, and based on the conversation from the community task force as well. And the exact language is included in your packet for initial resolution number 1, if you want to read what that looks like. It's a little bit longer than what's included on the board agenda.
All right. Got any comments or
I guess I do.
Justin?
Oh, so, I mean, I'm for sending it to the taxpayers. I know the middle school needs more room. I'm for all that. I'll vote yes on this. Someone makes a motion. My only concern is we're not asking for enough. It kind of feels like we need a bus, but we're asking for a minivan. We'll settle for a sedan. Like, I think we should just, my thought is ask for what we want versus do the tier thing. I know that's, not, we're looking at the likelihood of it passing, but if we get something that doesn't work perfect, like, the likelihood of asking for more money after that is probably not good. But I am for doing something for, whether it's this or something else.
I guess the only thing I would like to see is that it tracks. If we said this is what we want, the community says this is what you can have, I'd like to stay with that somehow if we have to manage it somehow. Because if we start going with we're gonna take this and add 2 million on when it just came out from, out of the black box, that's not gonna go over well either. So, I agree with you, but I understand, but I think this has gotta be as transparent as it can be. There's already some discourse here, so I think if we should just go ahead with this, and that'd be my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with Justin. I mean, I think from my perspective, we absolutely need to do something with the middle school. It is not gonna last much longer. It's not really meeting its purpose. Originally, when we had our meeting on Monday, I was in favor of 2 questions because I think it's always good to put it out to our community about what their threshold is now. I know we had a discussion about this on Monday, and I actually asked for clarification, and I know we're not to the second resolution yet, but I don't like the wording, and it's my understanding that legally, right now, if we want these 2 questions, this is how we have to word it, because I think it's confusing. I'm a little bit leaning towards what Justin's saying, if we really think that the project that's really gonna meet our needs is $22 million, I almost feel like we should ask for that. I realize that, right, we need to be responsible and we can't really afford it, but we also don't really have a choice in doing something. I think it's very confusing, the two resolutions together. And it seems, and it is a little bit like, well, we really need this, but we're gonna ask for this. And I get that we'll take what we can get, but it's a bit confusing, and I think it's hard to understand, because really the other one for the lesser amount, I think a lot of people think, oh great, lesser amount, but that's really adding on to this project, and so we're not really gonna do that project without this project, and so I think it's just really too confusing. And I agree that we need to be really transparent and clear, that we know ourselves what we're clear on, and when people ask us questions, and that the community really needs to understand this clearly, or it's just not gonna work.
It's gonna come back at us.
Correct. So while I liked the idea of like the threshold when we talked on Monday, I don't like it with these wordings.
And we spent hours with Quarles and Brady, the attorneys that create referendum questions, hours. As a whole administrative team, and then in smaller groups as well. And in the state of Wisconsin, referendum language can't be contingent. So they have to be standalone questions, which makes it a little bit more challenging. So you can't say if this passes, then this.
And you can't give the why as to, I know it was referenced as to, we're doing this because we'll eliminate X, Y, and Z. That's not allowed either. And we can't, and they have to be different questions. We couldn't word it to say, this would allow us to have 5th grade through 8th grade, and this would allow us to have 4th grade through 8th grade. It had to be completely different questions. So I agree with your concern there. I feel like big picture wise though, looking at it, that the real concern is getting those students right now out of the middle school. And that first question, if we have the ability to pass that first question at the community's threshold, and we can get those students out of the middle school and eliminate that extra cost, then that gives the community the opportunity to say, yes, we're okay with 4th grade going up as well, or no, we're not. And if we lump it all together, my fear is that they will say no because of that 4th grade push up there, regardless of what that means for the 5th through 8th grade students.
So a lot of this will come down to messaging and working on very clear messaging, so people understand what each question means in very plain language, so they aren't confused by the legalese when they get into the ballot.
So,
I guess the question I have, I know that when we originally had talked, it was regarding 16,000 and it was regarding 22,000.
Million?
Million. Wouldn't that have been nice? We would all be happy dancing right now. But I'm seeing, when I'm looking at this, that it's added just one alone of 5,910,000. And I don't know.
That's the confusing part. So
That's
that
what I'm
is
saying.
where you add the basically 6 million to the 16 million
That's
to
what I
get the
thought,
22
to
million.
get the 22
Because
million.
we can't ask it the other way.
According to legal counsel, this is the best.
Oh, you
that we can
can't
do.
ask for the.
Correct.
Oh,
Because that
and
would be-
so now the person would have to check mark both of them?
They
You have
will
to
be
say
two
yes to
separate
both.
questions, correct.
Now, what if they only did the 5 million and they didn't check mark the 16 million, then what happens?
The board would have options about whether they take that money or not.
But based on the wording, we wouldn't be able to do what it says that we would do with the 5 million. So you would have 5 years to exercise that bond and be able to literally draw on it. And if you don't within that time, then it doesn't impact, it doesn't go in. So it's basically like, yes, the 5 million passed, but we're not going to draw on that because we really can't do the project.
And so nobody's taxes would go up, right, because you're not using the money?
Correct. Correct.
So although it's not contingent, you can't really do one without, you can't do the second one without the first. But we can't write it with the same thought process of the 16 plus the 6 equaling 22 million. We legally are not able to write that.
And there are other districts that SiteLogic has worked with that have had similar types of situations. And the messaging on websites and in other locations, and when we do presentations, we'll be very clear what that means. The questions just can't be contingent upon each other.
So they'd have to answer yes for both of them.
In order to move
No.
forward, right?
They would have to.
In order to do the big addition, it would have to be yes to both.
But yes to the first question would be sufficient to do a project. Yes to the first question only. Yes to both questions would be sufficient to do the entire project. Yes to the second question really doesn't do anything. Second question only.
And what does yes to the first question do for bringing,
It would allow us to move 5th through 8th grade to the high school site in a new facility. The
and
majority of
leaving, and leaving AFE the way it is?
Correct. Tom wants to add something, I think.
I can understand the concern around, will somebody vote for question 2 and not for question 1, and, you know, that doesn't work in this particular situation. Colby, just, you know, up north here a little bit, in November, ran a referendum that was 2 questions, and the second question could not be done without the first question, but was less money, if I recall it correctly. And in that particular case, question 2 did get a few more yes votes than question 1 did, but it was about 1.5%. And so, given a good communication, you know, campaign through the referendum and really explaining this, as Dr. Thomas mentioned, we have not seen where that question 2 has been passed and a question 1 has not. You know, in our experience, I'm sure it's happened in the past somewhere at some time, but we've never had that instance. So just thought I'd add that.
All right. Anything else, board?
I think we've been walled in. Work's been done.
Right. So do we have a motion for 6.4?
I'll make that motion.
Justin?
I'll second.
Lana? All right, I have a motion by Justin, second by Lena. Consideration and action on initial resolution number 1, authorizing general obligation bond in the amount not to exceed $16,135,000 on the April 1st, 2025 election. That's this full resolution. Discussion? Or any more discussion? Seeing none, we will start this vote with Bobby.
No.
Steve?
Yes.
Justin?
Yes.
Lena?
Yes.
Joni?
Yes.
Mandy?
Yes.
Laura?
No.
And my vote is yes. Passes 6-2. All right. Moving on to 6.5, consideration and action on the initial resolution number 2, authorizing general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $5,910,000 on the April 1st, 2025 election. Full resolution is in front of us.
I'll make the motion.
Justin. Do I have a second?
Second.
Joni? I have a motion by Justin, second by Joni, for consideration and action on the initial resolution number 2, authorizing general obligation bond in an amount not to exceed $5,910,000 on the April 1st, 2025 election. Discussion. Seeing none, we will start this vote with Steve.
Yes.
Justin.
Yes.
Lena.
Yes.
Joni.
Yes.
Mandy.
No.
Laura.
No.
Bobby.
No.
And my vote is yes. Passes 5, 2, 3.
And in the back of your packet, you'll see the actual ballot question.
All right, moving on. 6.6. Consideration and action on the resolutions providing for a referendum election on the questions of the approval of the initial resolution authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $22,045,000 on the April 1st, 2025 election.
So what this does is allow us to go to bond for the full amount in a single bond if both of those questions pass.
So moved.
Motion by Lena,
Second.
that was Mandy.
Yes.
Motion by Lena, second by Mandy. Consideration and action on the resolution providing for a referendum election on the questions of the approval of initial resolutions authorizing the issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $22,045,000 on the April 1st election 2025. Discussion? Seeing none, we will start this vote with Justin.
Yes.
Lena.
Yes.
Joni.
Yes.
Mandy.
Yes.
Laura.
No.
Bobby.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Passes 7-1. All right, moving on. 6.7.
You heard from Heather and Kevin earlier about the high school program of study and the wording changes in course edition. We're asking you at this point in time to approve those changes.
Motion. Second.
So we got a motion by Lena, second by Mandy. The motion is to approve high school program of studies. Discussion. Seeing none, we will start this vote with Lena.
Yes.
Joni.
Yes.
Mandy.
Yes.
Laura.
Yes.
Bobby.
Yes.
Steve.
Yes.
Justin.
Yes.
And my vote is yes. Passes 8-0. All right. All right, 6.8, consideration and action on approval of MOU for Burt Morris Park.
And this is a long time coming. Obviously, most of you are aware that we've been playing softball at Burt Morris Park since at least the last 5 years, if not longer. And this memorandum of understanding kind of outlines responsibilities of the school district and the city of Adams, and also includes some information regarding Little League Baseball as well.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Bobby, second by Joni. The motion to approve an MOU for Burt Moore's Park. Discussion. Seeing none, we will start this vote with Joni.
Yes.
Mandy,
Yes.
Laura,
Yes.
Bobby,
Yes.
Steve,
Yes.
Justin,
Yes.
Lena,
Yes.
and my vote is yes. Passes 8-0. And with that, is there any objection to adjournment?
Make a motion to adjourn.
We are adjourned at 8:26.